Hi, I'm Max Keiser. This is the Keiser Report. Thanks again for all your concern. I've read the comments. I'm feeling much better and recovering from my chicken pox. Stacey Herbert, what's happening in the financial ledger domain?
Well, Max Keiser, the globe is not recovering from its pox, the pox in the house of Goldman Sachs, the pox in the house of JP Morgan. Now, I want to focus on these headlines here. Why elites fail. This is from Chris Hayes, who is a TV presenter on MSNBC, and he's an editor of The Nation. And he's suggesting that somehow the elites are failing by the system destabilized like it is. And it reminded me of Jim Cramer when he was also on CNBC, and he looked at Jamie Dimon sitting in front of Congress, in front of the Senate, and he called him this. He said this.
So you think we got some
He walked
heat to
in a
come?
loser. Testified.
What do you think about the stock
He
on the
walked
back
out
of
a
this?
loser. And by the way, let me tell you something. He agrees with me.
There is a myth being pushed by MSNBC, by CNBC Max, that somehow the elites have failed. By Jamie Dimon having to go to this show trial in which his innocence is proclaimed, that somehow he has failed, that he's stupid. The fact that the Eurozone is collapsing, a Eurozone devised by unelected elites, the fact that it's collapsing, that somehow they're losing, they failed.
No. It used to be that in order to communicate inside information to Congress, you had to go through back channels. Now, Dimon can go in front of Congress and tell them outright his plans for insider information and market manipulation. He knows that's the only basis of growth in the American economy is fraud, and he is the grand pontiff of fraud. And I don't see where Cramer comes off calling him a loser. He is a magnificent accomplishment in American culture. The fraud king as hero.
Well, you know, it's a show trial, okay? In the Soviet Union, they used to have show trials that they would pluck some guy who had the wrong ideas and they would put him on trial to say there was justice. That, see, we put him through a trial and he was found guilty. Here, they take really guilty people who have devastated lives across the world, and they put them on trial for a little thing like, how did you lose $2 billion on a trade, which is a fraction of the bad bets that we're paying for elsewhere, the bad fraud committed elsewhere that we're paying for. And now they're proclaiming him innocent. Well, it was just a little mistake. But importantly, he was wearing the presidential seal in front of the senators. Now, every single senator there wants to be president. He's signaling to them, I stand between you and the presidency. You cannot become president without my money. That is why Obama is down on his knees kissing my butt, because he wants to maintain his position as president.
Well, yes, this is all clear. I hope to anyone watching the proceedings that Dimon is the kingmaker. But, you know, my interest is not in the crimes he just committed, and they are outright fraud and crimes. That's indisputed. But my interest is in his next crime wave and the nature of the next securities frauds that he'll be committed. Will it be in the Eurozone, or will it be some other fraud? I think that's the more interesting point, is where will he strike next? The serial killer, when you observe a serial killer, they're always trying to find out where the serial killer is going to strike next. We already know where he already struck. We already know that Jamie Dimon's been involved in a serial killing-like episode of financial fraud and terrorism in America that's resulted in death and destruction and a complete discreditation of the American narrative. But the question is, who's he going to kill next? That's the cliffhanger. Who are you going to kill next, Jamie? That's the interesting bit.
Well, going back to the story, and you mentioned the American narrative, why elites fail. In order to live up to its ideals, a meritocracy must comply with two principles. The first is the principle of difference, i.e., the smartest guy, with the person with the best ideas should rise to the top. And the principle of mobility. Over time, there must be some continuous competitive selection process that ensures performance is rewarded and failure punished. We still have a system where performance is rewarded, but failure is never punished. And we see that over and over with Jamie Dimon, with Lloyd Blankfein, with Larry Summers, with all the too big to fail banks.
Well, performance is misunderstood because they equate GDP growth with performance, but GDP growth is tied to the levels of fraud that are rising like a tsunami in the system. So to that degree, someone like Jamie Dimon is certainly representative of a great success story in that he's managed, think of all the banker bonuses he's created. There's huge wealth and income gaps. There's a return to medievalism. There's a discreditation of the entire Enlightenment. There's a certain defecation on the Constitution from Jamie Dimon, but none of that matters anymore, especially in a drug-addled population with a short-term memory of a gnat who couldn't think back 2 hours, much less 240 years ago. So again, he's a gaming hero to this gaming culture because he can push buttons really fast and steal faster than anybody else. That makes him a hero. He's a guitar hero, Jamie Dimon. I can steal faster than anyone else in the world. I got the presidential cufflinks to prove it.
So when we go from the U.S., where Jamie Dimon obviously rules the roost, where he stands between you and your social mobility, up to the presidency, and from which there you can become the smartest guy in the Enron room, or the smartest guy in the Goldman Sachs room, or the smartest guy in the next fraudulent scheme that is devised. Now we turn to the Eurozone, which we see melting down. Some elite guys came up with an idea to, create a currency union. And the question is whether they have failed or not, or was this the plan? EU court to hear ECB Greek swap file suit as Euro threatened. So this was on Thursday before the election. This is Bloomberg News, and they're suing the ECB to get information about the Greek swap deals with Goldman Sachs. A court will hear a lawsuit seeking disclosure of European Central Bank files that may show how Greece used derivatives to hide its borrowings, helping to spark a crisis that threatens the region's currency union. The ECB, in its defense, is arguing that they should have discretion to decide what is in the public interest, and releasing the papers could damage the ECB's counterparties, hurt markets, and undermine EU policy.
What papers? It's already on the internet. There's 13 specific trades conducted by Goldman to commit fraud. That's not something that's hidden under in bureaucrat's drawer.
But Max, what they're seeking, they know this. They know for a fact these deals were done between Goldman Sachs and Greece. They know for an absolute 100% fact. What they're trying to see is if the ECB, the documents may be proof that there was a tacit collusion between the EU and Greece, that no action was taken. So they're saying that they were colluding, that the ECB knew that Greece was hiding its debt, and therefore they should have known that all of the following debts were odious, that they were engaged in a bogus deal with Goldman Sachs.
Right, and they will find that collusion took place. Number 2, they'll pass a law making collusion legal. Number 3, it'll be retroactive, making all past collusion unprosecutable. And 4, they'll continue to do it. We see it in America with the Verizon deal, spying. They pass laws to make it legal. When Goldman Sachs breaks the law, they pass a law saying now that's legal. When JP Morgan breaks a law, they pass a new law saying now it's legal. Now that's gone global. Break a law, we'll pass a law saying it's legal. So, and they hope to accomplish what? To further their own bureaucratic ends, again, by staying in some bureaucratic office for another month or so to pick up another paycheck at the expense of the many. It means nothing.
Well, so until the decision comes out from the ECB, all we have is that we do know for a fact, that it is the largest debt restructuring in history that has happened in Greece. But it's a 240 billion euro bailout. Now, Max, 240 billion euros in business, is that something you as a broker would have liked to have?
Of course, this is a great piece of business for them. The commissions are fantastic. It'll be much more than that. It has already been much more than that. And any opposition party or anybody who attempts to challenge it, of course, markets can be manipulated at the drop of a hat to influence public opinion. This is something that people have not yet realized, that the prices that they see for these markets are generated by design. They're not generated by supply and demand.
And remember, when we interviewed Yanis Varoufakis before the elections in Greece, he said that Greece was forced to take a loan from the EFSF in order to give to the ECB 900 million euros in profit on their discounted bonds they bought from Greece.
No, I understand there's an interest in looking at all these past transgressions and trying to come to terms with what to do with the criminal acts that have taken place. But again, I have to point out that the global economy is fast heading over the cliff, and we will soon be talking about something quite a bit greater in magnitude than the crisis, any part of the crisis thus far. It's very interesting that people are now waking up to the fact that there is this incredible miscarriage of justice, but people, it's way, way too late to be talking about that.
Well, so Bloomberg writes, Goldman's secret Greece loan shows two sinners as client unravels. So on the day the 2001 deal was struck, the government of Greece owed the bank about 600 million euros more than the 2.8 billion euros they borrowed. And within 2 years or 3 years, it was double the amount. So that's that. And Bloomberg notes in an interview with Gustavo Piga, author of Derivatives and Public Debt Management, in secret deals, intermediaries have the upper hand and use it to squeeze taxpayers. So across the United States, from JP Morgan's municipal rigging of the bond markets to the ECB and all of these bonds and the new bonds and old bonds and wrapped up into one bond, into a new bond, into the Euro bond, into the redemption bond, into the redemption fund, every single step of the way, the population, the taxpayer in Europe, the taxpayer in America, the taxpayers in Asia, who are also funding the IMF and all of these bailouts, they're being defrauded every step of the way.
Yes, and as a result, the collapse is coming. And this is what we've been waiting for. This is what we've been hoping for. Because the only way to get rid of this kleptocracy is through a collapse. And there's no political will to engineer or politicize or to elect leaders that will remove the kleptocrats. We must allow the system to collapse. So this is great. And if you're looking for a collapse, which is now in situ, you must cheer this collapse into its fruition, which is a massive global banking collapse and bank failures and capital controls and bank runs. They're in progress. They're happening. This is what we've been talking about. This is what we want. This is how we're going to get rid of this generation of kleptocrats. It's the only way, a scorched earth policy of a collapse. There's nothing left. There has been no political will to stop the likes of the Jamie Dimons out there. Hopefully you're ready for it with your gold and silver. If not, then you're part of history. Stacey Herbert, thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Thank you, Max.
All right, don't go away. Much more coming your way. Stay right there. Welcome back. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to go to economist, professor, and member of parliament in Tunisia, Monsef Sheikh Ruhu. Monsef, welcome to the Keiser Report.
Thanks for the invitation.
All right, Monsef, I first met you in July of 2009 when you sat opposite me on France 24's debate show where we debated Wall Street. Has it learned its lesson? And the answer obviously is yes. They have learned how to steal and steal and steal and get away with it again and again. Your thoughts?
Well, my thought is that when the communism died with the fall of the Berlin Wall, we didn't know that capitalism died the same day because good capitalism is not working anymore. And that's true that most of the people in Wall Street are trying to get money, but not trying to finance the real economy, job creation, and wealth creation.
Well, it's interesting you bring up the fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of communism, and you say that there was a collapse of capitalism at the same time. I would posit that what we saw was a continuation of central planning. The central planning ball was picked up by the Federal Reserve Bank and the banks on Wall Street, who stopped competing. At least when they had a major adversary in the world, they were competing. But once the wall came down, you had no more competition in America. It became a centrally planned Federal Reserve, central banker planned economy where the wealth and income gap skyrocketed to levels that you'd have to go back to previous communist regimes to have a comparison to.
Yeah, Max, you see why I really love to discuss with you, because you're always one step ahead of me. And by talking about central planning or a worldwide GOS plan that is done by those who are seeking profits without creating any riches to the world, is that the name of the game? But I'm more interested in the cures. How can we face that up? How can we stop that? So real economy is the name of the game, not virtual economy. Subprimes is the virtual economy. And unfortunately, I said that capitalism, good capitalism, died because today, what is backing the dollar? Look at the what is called by the New York Times the scheme behind the dollar, the strata of things that have no value, and still the dollar is having a value against the other currencies in the world. Today, we need to go back to real economics and give the goods and services and currencies the value that is real behind them and not the fake value that is behind them.
All right, well, picking up on that thought, let's talk about Greece specifically and your idea about having a real economy based on real values and not the fake fiat banking legerdemain of the IMF, the ECB, the EU, the so-called Troika. So what would Greece do right now to introduce something real into their economy?
Okay, what is real in Greece is that spending is taking place. Now, why is the budget of Greece has been in a deficit, in such a large deficit for such a long time? If you look at it, you find that most of the expenses did not benefit the people of Greece. 24% of the people of Greece are living under the bar of poverty. In spite of that, the spending, the expenditure on armament, on arms by Greece is totally crazy. And where are those arms bought? In Germany and in the United States. So if we look at the system, we see that the budget is not there to create real jobs, to finance real projects in infrastructure, in education, in health, but it is there to spend money in order to serve the best interests of those who are selling arms and make the Eastern Mediterranean look like as if it were a big war machine, while the only problems there is the little problem of Cyprus, and it doesn't require all that money that Greece has been spending while the people of Greece was deprived from it.
Yeah, I just read an editorial, I guess you could call it, in the Financial Times from the leader of Syriza, the left-wing party, talking about a need to improve growth, but not once did he mention the military spending, which is completely out of control, because I guess, Monsef, the point is that you still have to be a populist in the sense that you need to appeal to the voters' base instincts instead of their economic interests. The voters are basically economically illiterate, not so much in Tunisia, Monsef. In Tunisia, they figured out that economically they were not doing well. They staged a revolution. And tell us, how are things doing in Tunisia now, Monsef?
Well, Tunisia is like a boat that has left a bank river where there has been corruption and dictatorship. They were, as you have said very rightly, sick and tired because a couple of families were grasping the wealth of the country. So they made the revolution. The boat has left the bank and it wants to reach the other bank. What is the other bank? It's the bank of real democracy, what the people really want, and the bank of the fighting of corruption and false economy. The boat now is in the middle of the stream. Of course, the stream is turbulent, but in spite of that, Tunisia is doing all right because every morning it is pursuing the same goal, creating real wealth, creating jobs, and sharing it in a way that makes people feel their everyday life is getting better. Their sons are not inheriting the cancer of the Western societies today, which is the debts, huge debts. We don't want that. We want the kids in Tunisia to inherit olive trees and not debts.
Right. Well, the biggest obstacle there, I would imagine, in getting all the way, the boat all the way across to democratic reforms would be an entrenched kleptocratic nightmare like a Goldman Sachs, for example. Goldman Sachs is in the news as Bloomberg sues the European Central Bank to try to get papers that may prove the collusion between various EU bodies and Greece in hiding Greece's debt to get them into the European Union. This has been a story that's been around for a while. They're finally getting around to focusing on it, the fact that Goldman Sachs helped Greece hide debts. Goldman Sachs, of course, a big player in causing financial disruption around the world. Your thoughts?
Well, I was reading the declaration of the head of Goldman Sachs yesterday, Mr. Blankfein, and he was saying that he wishes to stay on forever. So not only his bank, but he will be staying on forever. And this reminds me that when we had our debate, unfortunately, I did not know that Goldman Sachs was advising Greece, not for the sake of Greece, but for the sake of Goldman Sachs. So it was advising Greece on telling them how to hide some statistics, to hide the real bad shape of the economy. But on the other hand, they were at the same time, apparently, betting against the bonds of Greece. There will be two types of countries, no longer developed and underdeveloped, no longer rich and poor. You're going to have two types of countries in the world today: emerging countries and submerged countries. Emerging countries that will be growing, using real economy, getting away of such bankers that are playing their future at risk. They are using high frequency trading to have makeshift profits. And on the other hand, real bankers, bankers that come to you and say, hey, you want finance? What do you want to do with this money? What real projects do you want to finance? How many jobs are you creating? How are these jobs going to be distributed so that macroeconomics goes properly? So the world now is looking eastward, not because China or Russia or India or Brazil or Mexico or South Africa are very sexy. It's because those people know how to manage banks. Banks are at the service of real economy. And in the formerly rich world, the economy is at the service of banks.
But Monsef, we know that to grow an economy using legitimate banking practices, you're talking about a growth rate that is on a linear path, whereas if you're crashing an economy using paper contracts and high-frequency trading, you can make a lot of money in exponentially quick terms. So how do you overcome this incentivized financial terrorism armed with infinite amounts of virtual paper in which to snuff out any attempt by anyone to have a legitimate economy that's going to grow in a legitimate way?
Two comments after your very, very important remark here. First comment, when I started teaching finance, international finance, at the Graduate School of Business Administration of Paris, I got so shocked in the early 2000s when a top professor, researcher coming from the East Coast of the United States, big university, was showing us a model of some bad financial products, like a hand grenade that's about to burst. And he was telling us, this is the model that will tell you when to buy it and when to sell it at the very last moment before it bursts in the hands of the next buyer, and then you make the highest profit out of that. I was shocked because no one was asking any moral question about this. And this is exactly what you are describing here. My second remark is that what is happening through this grasping the profit now, exponentially, you're right, and not linearly, is exactly what is happening in the body of a person that has cancer. The cancerous cells suck blood 10 times more than the safe cells. But at the end, what's going to happen? If there is no cure, if there is no treatment, then the body will die. Are we going to let great economies like the Western economies today die because some cells in the system are sucking in the blood and letting the rest of the body, all the whole cells look so pale? This is the question that all those demonstrations in Wall Street, in Paris, in Canada, and everywhere are saying. The kids are saying, we don't want any cancerous cells to suck the blood of our country.
All right, Monsef, good luck with the Tunisian revolution, and thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Thank you very much for having me here, in spite of my defending somehow a point of view about Goldman Sachs 3 years ago.
Well, we'll have you back on again real soon.
Look forward to that. In Tunis, probably. I'll invite you there.
Fantastic. And that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacey Herbert. I want to thank my guest, Monsef Sheikh Ruhu. If you want to send me an email, please do so at keiserreport@rttv.ru. Until next time, Max Keiser saying bye, y'all.